the day my husband married his mistress. I inherited $250 million. Oh, darling, the game has just begun. My name is Zita, and I am 34 years old. I am standing in the kitchen of a house I once believed would be my forever home. For 8 years, I poured every piece of myself into a marriage I thought was built on love. I trusted completely. I sacrificed endlessly. And I never imagined that the man I gave everything to was already planning his escape with another woman. But here is the twist. The moment I lost him, fate handed me something he had always dreamed of having. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments. And if you have ever experienced betrayal or fought your way back from heartbreak, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. You will want to stay for this one. Now let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment I thought I had everything. I met Marcus when I was 24 years old, fresh out of design school and full of dreams. He was charming in a way that made you feel like the only person in the room when he looked at you. We were introduced at a mutual friend's birthday party in downtown Atlanta, and from that very first conversation, I felt something shift inside me. He was studying law at the time, working part-time at a small firm while finishing his degree. I remember thinking how ambitious he was, how driven. He spoke about his future with such certainty that I found myself wanting to be part of it. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It was a simple proposal, nothing extravagant. He took me to the park where we had our first real date and got down on one knee with a modest ring that he had saved up for months to buy. I said yes without hesitation. I loved him. I believed in him. And I was ready to build a life together. What I did not know then was how much building I would be doing alone. The first few years of our marriage were defined by sacrifice. Marcus was still in law school, and the tuition bills kept piling up. His credit history was damaged from mistakes he made in his early 20s, so he could not take out loans on his own. I stepped in without being asked. I took on a second freelance job designing logos and branding materials late into the night after my regular work hours ended. I cut back on everything I could. New clothes became a luxury I could not afford. Vacations were something other couples did. I told myself it was temporary, that once Marcus graduated and started his career, things would change. And in some ways, they did. Marcus passed the bar exam on his first try. He landed a position at a mid-sized law firm that paid well enough for us to breathe a little easier. We bought a house in the suburbs, a 2-story colonial with a small backyard and a kitchen I fell in love with the moment I saw it. The mortgage was in my name because Marcus still had credit issues he was working through. I did not mind. We were a team, and teams support each other. But as Marcus climbed the ladder at his firm, I noticed something shifting between us. He started working longer hours, which I understood. He came home exhausted, which I accepted. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, I began to feel like a supporting character in my own marriage. When Marcus got a promotion, I was the one who organized the celebration dinner and made sure his favorite meal was on the table. When he needed to network with senior partners, I was the one who bought him new suits and rehearsed conversation topics with him. I stepped back from my own career opportunities because Marcus said he needed me at home, that his job was demanding enough for both of us. I told myself I was being a good wife. I told myself this was what partnership looked like. His mother, Lorraine, had a different opinion of me. From the very beginning, she made it clear that I was not the daughter-in-law she had envisioned. Lorraine came from old money that had mostly dried up, but she clung to the appearance of wealth like a life raft. She thought Marcus deserved someone from a better family, someone with connections and a trust fund. I was just a girl from a middle-class home who worked with her hands for a living. Every holiday dinner with her felt like an audition I could never pass. She would comment on my cooking, my clothes, the way I decorated our home. Nothing was ever quite right. I tried to win her over for years. I remembered her birthday every single time. I sent flowers on Mother's Day. I bit my tongue when she made snide remarks about my career choice. Marcus would occasionally defend me, but more often he would say things like, "That's just how she is," as if that excused everything. Despite all of this, I remained blindly devoted to my marriage. I never checked Marcus's phone or questioned his explanations. When he started coming home later, and later citing important cases and demanding clients, I believed every word. I even bragged to my friends about how hard my husband worked, how dedicated he was to providing for our future. Our future. That was what kept me going. Marcus and I had been talking about starting a family. We went to doctors, took fertility tests, and began preparing a nursery in the spare bedroom. I painted the walls a soft yellow and hung a mobile of tiny stars above where the crib would go. I imagined the sound of a baby's laughter filling our home, and for a moment everything felt worth it. That night, the night everything began to unravel, I cooked Marcus's favorite meal. Roasted chicken with rosemary, garlic, mashed potatoes, and green beans sautéed in butter. I set the table with our nice dishes, the ones we only used for special occasions. I lit candles. I waited. Marcus was supposed to be home by 7. By 8, I texted him, asking if everything was okay. He replied that he was stuck in a meeting and would be home soon. By 9:30, the food was cold, and my patience was wearing thin. When he finally walked through the door at 10:15, his hair was slightly damp, like he had just showered. "Sorry, babe," he said, tossing his briefcase on the counter. The meeting ran late, and then I hit the gym at the office to blow off some steam. I remember standing there holding a plate of cold chicken and feeling something crack inside me, because I knew for a fact that his office did not have a gym. I did not say anything that night. I smiled, reheated his dinner, and pretended everything was fine. But as I lay in bed next to him hours later, listening to his steady breathing, I could not shake the feeling that the man beside me was becoming a stranger. That night, I waited with his favorite meal on the table, but Marcus never came home for dinner. And when he finally walked through that door 3 hours later, everything I believed in began to crumble. The days that followed were filled with small observations that I could no longer ignore. Marcus changed his phone password. When I asked him about it casually, he said it was a security requirement from his firm, something about protecting client information. It sounded reasonable enough, but the timing felt strange. He started taking his phone everywhere, even into the bathroom when he showered, before he would leave it charging on the nightstand without a second thought. Now it was attached to him like an extra limb. When it buzzed during dinner, he would glance at the screen and quickly flip it face down, his expression unreadable. I began paying closer attention to our credit card statements. There were charges at restaurants I had never heard of, places with names that suggested intimate atmospheres and expensive wine lists. When I mentioned one of them, asking if he had taken clients there, Marcus hesitated for just a fraction of a second before nodding. "Yeah, that was a business lunch," he said smoothly. "You know how it is with these corporate clients." But the charge was from 8:30 in the evening. That was not a lunch. The weekends became strange as well. Marcus started receiving phone calls that he insisted on taking outside, walking out to the back porch and closing the door behind him. I could see him through the window, pacing back and forth, his face animated in a way I rarely saw anymore. He would come back inside and tell me it was work-related, that a case was demanding all his attention. but his voice carried a different energy, something lighter than the stress he claimed to be under. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust the man I had married. So I pushed my doubts down and focused on being supportive. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. I was at a shopping center on the north side of Atlanta, browsing through a home goods store and looking for new curtains for the living room. It was a Wednesday, and Marcus was supposedly in depositions all day. I decided to grab a coffee before heading home, and that was when I saw them. Marcus was sitting in a cafe across the corridor, his back partially turned toward me. Across from him was a woman I did not recognize. She had long brown hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, and she was dressed in a tailored blazer that screamed expensive taste. She was laughing at something Marcus said, her hand reaching across the table to touch his arm. I froze. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain people around me could hear it. Marcus leaned forward and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It was such an intimate gesture, the kind of touch that goes beyond professional courtesy. The kind of touch he used to give me. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Every instinct told me to march over there and demand an explanation. But my legs would not move. Fear and disbelief rooted me to the spot. Eventually, I turned and walked away, my coffee forgotten, my mind racing. That evening, I acted as if nothing had happened. Marcus came home at his usual late hour, and I served dinner with steady hands and a calm voice. I asked about his day, and he told me about the depositions, the difficult witnesses, the mountains of paperwork. He lied to my face with the ease of someone who had been practicing for a long time. I barely slept that night. Instead, I lay in the darkness and replayed every suspicious moment from the past several months. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the sudden interest in going to the gym even though Marcus had always hated exercise. The new cologne he had started wearing, a scent I had not chosen for him. I told myself there could be an innocent explanation. Maybe she was a colleague. Maybe the gesture meant nothing. Maybe I was being paranoid, jealous, insecure. All the things women are accused of being when they dare to question their husbands. But a voice inside me, one I had been silencing for far too long, whispered that I already knew the truth. I just was not ready to face it. Over the next few days, I began quietly investigating. I checked Marcus's calendar app when he left his tablet unlocked, noting discrepancies between where he said he would be and where the entries indicated. A supposed business trip 2 weeks earlier showed reservations at a hotel downtown, not the out-of-state conference he had claimed to attend. My stomach turned when I realized the implications. He had been in the city the entire time, less than 20 miles from our home, and had not told me. I did not confront him. Not yet. Something told me that if I wanted to protect myself, I needed more than suspicions. I needed proof. Marcus was a lawyer. He knew how to argue his way out of anything. If I came at him with accusations and no evidence, he would twist the narrative until I was the one apologizing. So I waited. I watched. And I prepared myself for the moment when I could no longer deny what was happening. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Marcus loved me, but deep down a voice I had been ignoring for months was screaming the truth I was too afraid to face. The confirmation came on a night when Marcus fell asleep earlier than usual. He had been drinking at a work event, came home drowsy and distracted, and passed out on the bed, still wearing his dress shirt. His phone was on the nightstand, and as I walked past it, lit up with a notification. The name on the screen was simply a letter. V. Next to it was a small red heart emoji. The preview of the message read, "I miss you already. Cannot wait for our weekend getaway." My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. Marcus was snoring softly, deep in alcohol-induced sleep. I pressed his thumb against the sensor, holding my breath as the screen unlocked. What I found in the next hour destroyed every illusion I had been clinging to. Her name was Vanessa. She was 28 years old and worked in the human resources department at Marcus's firm. The conversation thread between them stretched back over 2 years. 2 years of lies. 2 years of betrayal happening right under my nose while I cooked his dinners and supported his dreams. I scrolled through message after message, each one a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Marcus called her my love and my future. They exchanged intimate photographs that made me physically ill. They discussed vacations they had taken together, trips that Marcus had told me were business conferences in other cities. San Diego, Miami, New York, all places he had gone with her while I waited at home, trusting him completely. But the messages that hurt the most were the ones about me. Marcus described me as boring. He said I had let myself go, that I was no longer the woman he had married. He complained that I was always asking him questions, always wanting to know where he was and who he was with. He called me a burden he was tired of carrying. I read those words and felt something inside me die. Then I found the emails. Marcus had been consulting with a divorce attorney for months. He was building a case against me, gathering what he considered evidence of my shortcomings as a wife. He planned to push for the house, claiming that his income had paid for most of it. He wanted to minimize what I would receive in a settlement. He discussed timelines with his lawyer, talking about waiting until after his next bonus to file so he could protect that money. And there, buried in one of the emails, was a sentence that took my breath away. Once the divorce is finalized, Vanessa and I plan to marry quickly. She wants a spring wedding. He was going to marry her. He was going to throw away 8 years of our marriage, 8 years of my sacrifice, and walk straight into the arms of another woman without looking back. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until I had nothing left. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. My eyes were swollen. My face was blotchy. I looked broken. But as the tears dried and the shock began to fade, something else took its place. Anger. White hot and clarifying. I was not going to let Marcus destroy me. I was not going to be the discarded wife who walked away with nothing while he lived happily ever after with his mistress. I went back to his phone and took screenshots of everything. Every message, every photograph, every email. I sent them to a secure email address I created on the spot, an account Marcus knew nothing about. Then I erased any trace of my activity, put the phone back exactly where I had found it, and climbed into bed beside the man who had betrayed me. He stirred slightly and reached for my hand in his sleep. I let him take it, even though his touch now made my skin crawl. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I had to pretend that nothing had changed, that I was still the oblivious wife who suspected nothing. Every morning I made coffee for Marcus. Every evening I sat across from him at dinner and listened to his lies. When he touched me, I forced myself not to flinch. When he told me he loved me, I said it back, with a smile that felt like broken glass. But every night after he fell asleep, I continued building my case. I documented everything. I tracked his credit card charges. I noted the times he came home and compared them to the excuses he gave. I was methodical, careful, patient. I knew that when the time came to fight, I would be ready. I had all the evidence I needed. I was ready to confront him, to fight for what was mine. But then something happened that changed everything. Something neither Marcus nor I could have ever predicted. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my desk working on a logo design for a small business client when an unfamiliar number appeared on my screen. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Is this Zita Morrison?" The voice was professional measured. "Yes, this is she." "Ms. Morrison, my name is Robert Chen. I am an attorney based in San Francisco, and I am calling regarding the estate of Eleanor Ashford." The name hit me like a wave. Eleanor Ashford, my grandmother. A woman I had met only a handful of times in my entire life. Mr. Chen continued, his tone gentle but businesslike. "I regret to inform you that Ms. Ashford passed away last week. She named you as the sole beneficiary of her estate, and I need to arrange a meeting with you at your earliest convenience." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. My grandmother was dead. The grandmother who had cut ties with my family decades ago, who had not spoken to my mother in years before she passed, who existed in my memory as a distant figure from a few awkward holiday visits when I was a child. "I am sorry," I finally managed. "There must be some mistake. My grandmother and I were not close. We barely knew each other." "There is no mistake, Ms. Morrison. Ms. Ashford's instructions were very clear. She left everything to you." I flew to San Francisco alone 3 days later. I told Marcus I was visiting an old college friend who was going through a difficult time. He barely looked up from his phone when I said goodbye, which only confirmed how far apart we had drifted. Mr. Chen's office was in a high-rise building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the bay. He was an older man with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that put me slightly at ease. He gestured for me to sit, then placed a thick folder on the desk between us. "Before we discuss the details of the estate," he said, "I want to give you some background on your grandmother. Eleanor Ashford was a remarkable woman. She built her real estate empire from nothing, starting with a single rental property in Oakland and eventually expanding to commercial developments across California. She never married, never had children of her own. Your mother was her only sibling's daughter, which makes you her closest living relative." I listened, trying to reconcile this description with the cold, distant woman I vaguely remembered. "Your grandmother kept track of you," Mr. Chen continued. "She knew about your marriage. She knew about your career. She followed your life from a distance, even when she could not be part of it directly." "Why did she stay away?" I asked. "Why did she cut off my mother?" Mr. Chen sighed. "There was a falling out many years ago. Your grandmother disapproved of your mother's choice of husband. She said things that could not be taken back. By the time she realized her mistake, too much time had passed. Pride kept her silent. Regret kept her watching." He opened the folder and slid a document toward me. "This is the summary of the estate. Total assets, including real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and liquid funds, come to approximately $250 million. All of it goes to you." I stared at the number on the page. It did not feel real. Nothing about this moment felt real. Along with the legal documents, Mr. Chen handed me a sealed envelope. "Your grandmother wrote this for you. She wanted you to read it after you understood the scope of what she was leaving behind." I opened the envelope with trembling fingers and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, each word carefully formed. "Dear Zita," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone, and my final act of cowardice has been completed. I should have reached out to you years ago. I should have apologized to your mother before she died. I should have been braver. But I was not, and now all I can offer you is this. I have watched your life from afar. I have seen your kindness, your strength, your willingness to sacrifice for those you love. I have also seen how others take advantage of that kindness. You remind me of myself when I was young before I learned that giving everything to the wrong people leaves you with nothing. I am giving you this money not as an apology, because no amount of money can make up for the family I failed to be. I am giving it to you as freedom. Freedom to choose your own path. Freedom to walk away from anyone who does not see your worth. Freedom to build a life that belongs only to you. Trust no one who only appeared after they learned of your fortune. And remember, the most valuable thing I am leaving you is not the money. It is permission to put yourself first. With love and regret, Eleanor. I read the letter 3 times before I could see clearly through my tears. There was one more detail Mr. Chen needed to explain. The estate would be transferred to me with a single condition. I was required to keep the inheritance confidential for 60 days while the legal transfer was completed. If I disclosed the information before that period ended, a portion of the estate would automatically be redirected to various charitable organizations. Your grandmother wanted to ensure that your decisions during this time were not influenced by outside pressures, Mr. Chen explained. She wanted you to have space to think clearly about your future. I agreed to the terms. Then I flew back to Atlanta with a secret that changed everything. Marcus was on the couch when I walked through the door, scrolling through his phone. He barely glanced up. "How is your friend?" he asked absently. "She is doing better," I replied. "It was good to see her." He nodded and returned his attention to the screen. I could see the reflection of a text conversation, though I could not read the words. It did not matter. I already knew who he was talking to. I carried my suitcase upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed, my grandmother's letter tucked safely in my purse. The woman who had walked out of this house 3 days ago had been desperate, wounded, unsure of her next move. The woman who returned was something different. I was no longer afraid of what Marcus might do. I was no longer paralyzed by the thought of losing everything. For the first time in months, I felt something that resembled power. He had no idea that the woman sitting across from him was no longer the naive wife he thought he could discard. The game had changed, and I was just getting started. The confrontation came sooner than I expected, but not in the way I had planned. 1 week after I returned from San Francisco, Marcus sat me down in the living room with an expression of rehearsed solemnity. He had practiced this, I realized. He had stood in front of a mirror and worked on the angle of his brow, the downward curve of his mouth, the way his hands folded in his lap to convey reluctant sincerity. "Sita," he began, his voice measured. "I have been doing a lot of thinking about us, about our marriage, and I have come to a difficult conclusion." I remained silent, watching him perform. "I am not happy," he continued. "I have not been happy for a long time, and I think the kindest thing we can do for both of us is to end this marriage and allow ourselves the chance to find fulfillment elsewhere." The kindest thing, as if he were doing me a favor by throwing me away. "I have already spoken with an attorney," he said. "We can make this as simple and painless as possible. I am willing to be fair." "Fair?" I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes." He nodded, pleased that I seemed to be taking this calmly. "I think the best arrangement is for you to move out of the house. I have been covering most of the expenses anyway, so it makes sense for me to stay. We can discuss a reasonable settlement, something to help you get back on your feet." I almost laughed. The house was in my name. I had been the one to make the down payment. I had been the one whose credit score allowed us to qualify for the mortgage in the first place. But Marcus had already rewritten history in his mind, casting himself as the provider and me as the dependent. What about Vanessa? I asked, keeping my voice steady. His face flickered with surprise, but he recovered quickly. Who, Vanessa? The woman you have been sleeping with for the past 2 years. The woman you are planning to marry once you are rid of me. The mask slipped. For just a moment I saw raw panic in his eyes. Then the lawyer training kicked in, and he leaned back with an air of wounded dignity. I do not know what you think you know, he said carefully, but making accusations like that will only make this process harder for both of us. I have screenshots of every message you sent her, every photograph, every email to your divorce attorney. I have credit card records showing the hotels you stayed in together, the dinners you bought her, the gifts you charged to our joint account. I paused, letting the words sink in. I know everything, Marcus. The color drained from his face, but I was not finished. You can file for divorce, I said. In fact, I encourage it, but you should know that my attorney will be presenting all of this evidence in court. Georgia recognizes fault-based divorce, and adultery affects the division of assets. The house stays with me. The settlement will reflect the 8 years I spent supporting your career while you planned your escape. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time in our marriage, he had no argument prepared. I stood up and walked toward the stairs. At the bottom step, I turned back to face him. You thought you were playing chess with a pawn, I said quietly. You had no idea you were facing a queen. 2 days later, Marcus moved out of the house. He went to stay with his mother, who immediately began calling me with barely veiled threats and demands that I be reasonable. I let her calls go to voicemail. Vanessa wasted no time making her presence known. Within 48 hours of Marcus filing for divorce, she was posting photographs of the two of them on social media. New beginnings. She captioned one picture of them at a restaurant, his arm wrapped possessively around her shoulders. Comments flooded in from people who had no idea the relationship had started while he was still married. Marcus began spreading rumors through our mutual social circles. He told people I was controlling, jealous, emotionally unavailable. He painted himself as the victim of a loveless marriage, a man who had tried his best to make things work. Some people believed him. Old friends stopped returning my calls. Invitations to gatherings quietly disappeared. His mother came to the house in person, her face pinched with righteous indignation. She stood in my doorway and told me that I had never been good enough for her son, that she had always known I would hold him back. Marcus deserves to be happy, Lorraine declared. He deserves someone who appreciates him. You should have the dignity to step aside gracefully instead of dragging this out. I listened to her speech without interrupting. When she finished, I smiled politely. Lorraine, I said, I know you have been aware of Marcus's affair for some time. I know you encouraged it. And I want you to understand something clearly. Your opinion of me has never mattered, and it certainly does not matter now. Please leave my property. Her mouth fell open. For a moment she seemed about to argue. Then something in my expression must have convinced her otherwise, because she turned and walked back to her car without another word. The nights were the hardest. Alone in the house we had shared, surrounded by memories that now felt like lies, I struggled to hold myself together. I would find myself in the kitchen at 2 a.m, staring at the wedding photograph on the refrigerator and wondering how I had missed so many signs. One night, I sat on the living room floor with our photo album open in my lap. Pictures of our wedding day, vacations we had taken in happier years, holiday gatherings with forced smiles and underlying tensions I had chosen not to see. 8 years of my life documented in glossy images that no longer told the truth. I cried until my chest ached. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the woman I used to be. the one who believed that love and sacrifice would always be rewarded. I cried for the future I had imagined, the children we would never have, the growing old together that would never happen. But in the middle of that darkness, I remembered my grandmother's letter. Her words echoed in my mind like a lifeline. I am giving you freedom. Freedom to choose your own path. I was not a victim. I had resources Marcus did not know about. I had evidence he could not dispute. And I had something he had tried to destroy but failed: my sense of self-worth. I wiped my eyes and closed the album. Then I opened my laptop and began composing an email to the best divorce attorney in Atlanta. Marcus thought he was playing chess with a pawn. He had no idea he was facing a queen, and the checkmate was coming. The 60-day confidentiality period ended on a Friday. The following Monday, I walked into my attorney's office with documentation of my inheritance and a clear plan for moving forward. Her name was Diane Foster, and she had a reputation for being relentless in divorce proceedings. She reviewed my evidence with the careful attention of someone who had seen every possible permutation of marital betrayal, and by the end of our meeting, she was smiling. "Your husband made a serious miscalculation," she said. "He assumed he was dealing with someone who had no options. We are going to show him exactly how wrong he was." The mediation session was held 2 weeks later in a conference room downtown. Marcus arrived with his attorney, a younger man who looked confident until he saw the thickness of the folder Diane placed on the table. We presented everything: the text messages, the photographs, the credit card records showing charges at hotels and restaurants during times Marcus claimed to be working or traveling for business. The emails to his divorce attorney, which revealed his intention to misrepresent his financial contributions to the marriage. Marcus sat across from me with his jaw clenched, watching his carefully constructed narrative collapse. His attorney requested multiple recesses to confer privately, and each time they returned, Marcus looked a little more defeated. Given the evidence of adultery and financial deception, Diane stated calmly, "My client will be retaining full ownership of the marital home to which she holds the title. We will also be seeking a settlement that reflects her contributions to Mr. Morrison's education and career advancement over the course of 8 years." Marcus's attorney tried to argue, but the facts were not on his side. By the end of the session, they had agreed to nearly every one of our terms. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. I kept the house. I received a settlement that, while modest compared to my inheritance, represented a symbolic victory. And Marcus's reputation in Atlanta's legal community took a significant hit. Word spread about how his marriage had ended, and several of his most important clients quietly transferred their business elsewhere. Within 6 months, he had left the firm to take a position at a smaller practice in another city. Vanessa's devotion to Marcus turned out to be conditional. When she discovered the extent of my inheritance, her calculations changed. She had pursued Marcus believing he was her path to financial security. Learning that his ex-wife had received $250 million while Marcus struggled to rebuild his career must have been a bitter pill to swallow. Their relationship began fraying almost immediately. Arguments about money, resentment about missed opportunities. Within 3 months of my divorce being finalized, Vanessa had ended things and moved on to pursue a wealthy real estate developer she met at a charity event. Marcus reached out to me once during this period, a late-night text message that read, "I made mistakes. I miss what we had. Can we talk?" I read it, considered responding, and then deleted it without reply. Lorraine also attempted to re-establish contact. After learning about my inheritance, her hostility transformed into effusive warmth. She left voicemails asking if we could meet for lunch, suggesting we let bygones be bygones. She sent cards on holidays with handwritten notes about how she had always cared for me like a daughter. I returned none of her calls. When she finally managed to reach me directly, I kept the conversation brief. "Lorraine," I said, "you made your loyalties clear when I needed support. I do not hold grudges, but I also do not pretend that history did not happen. I wish you well, but there is nothing left for us to discuss." She sputtered something about misunderstandings and family, but I ended the call before she could finish. With my divorce behind me, I focused on building the life my grandmother had wanted for me. I sold the house in the suburbs, the one filled with memories I no longer wanted to carry. I purchased a penthouse in Midtown Atlanta, a space that was entirely my own, decorated to my tastes, free of any connection to Marcus. I founded my own design firm, hiring talented young artists and building a client list that grew steadily through referrals and reputation. The work energized me in ways my freelance career never had. I was creating something meaningful, providing opportunities for others, putting my skills to use on my own terms. Following my grandmother's example, I invested in real estate. I started small, acquiring rental properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods, learning the business through careful research and occasional mistakes. Each success built my confidence. Each setback taught me something valuable. I also established a scholarship fund in my mother's name, providing financial assistance to single mothers pursuing higher education. It was a way of honoring both the woman who raised me and the grandmother who had given me the means to make a difference. The day I signed the paperwork for that scholarship, I felt something shift inside me. Not happiness exactly, but something close to peace. 1 year after my divorce was finalized, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse and watched the sun set over the Atlanta skyline. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, another attempt at reconciliation that I did not bother reading before deleting. He wanted back in my life after I became what he always wished he could be. But some doors once closed are meant to stay that way forever. Healing did not happen overnight. For months after the divorce, even with money and success and freedom, I felt hollow. The betrayal had carved out something inside me, and no amount of achievement could immediately fill that void. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Patricia Wells. She had an office with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, and a way of asking questions that made me examine parts of myself I had been avoiding for years. In our sessions, I talked about Marcus, about my marriage, about all the warning signs I had chosen to ignore. "You are not to blame for his choices," Dr. Wells told me during one of our early meetings, "but understanding why you stayed, why you accepted less than you deserved, that is important work. Not so you can punish yourself, but so you can build differently next time." Slowly, I began to understand the patterns that had shaped my marriage. The way I had equated sacrifice with love. The way I had made myself smaller to make Marcus feel larger. The way I had been so afraid of conflict that I had avoided asking questions whose answers I did not want to hear. Forgiving myself was harder than forgiving Marcus. I could recognize his failures clearly, but my own felt more complicated. I should have seen the signs. I should have valued myself more. I should have left before it got so bad. Dr. Wells helped me reframe those thoughts. "Should statements are rarely useful," she said. "You made the best decisions you could with the information and resources you had at the time. Now you have more information and more resources. That is growth, not failure." I built new relationships carefully. I joined a business networking group for women entrepreneurs and found mentors who had navigated their own difficult transitions. I reconnected with old friends who had been pushed to the margins of my life during my marriage, and I was honest with them about what had happened. Some of them shared their own stories of betrayal and recovery, and I realized I was far from alone. I did not rush into dating. Men approached me at events and through mutual connections, but I was in no hurry. For the first time in my adult life, I was learning what it felt like to be complete on my own without defining myself through a relationship. 6 months after my therapy began, I flew to San Francisco to visit my grandmother's grave. She was buried in a cemetery overlooking the bay, her headstone simple and elegant bearing only her name and dates. I sat on a bench nearby and spoke to her as if she could hear me. "I wish I had known you better," I said. "I wish you had been braver, and I wish I had been braver too. But I understand why you did what you did. And I want you to know that your gift changed my life. Not just the money, though, that mattered, but the letter. The permission to put myself first. That is what I will carry with me." I placed a bouquet of white roses on her grave and sat in silence for a long time, watching the fog roll in from the water. I heard occasional updates about Marcus through the grapevine. He was working at a small firm in Charlotte, now handling routine cases far below the level he had once aspired to. His relationship with Vanessa had collapsed, and as far as anyone knew, he was single. His mother visited him on holidays, still insisting to anyone who would listen that her son had been wronged. I did not hate Marcus anymore. Hatred requires energy, and I had better uses for mine. What I felt when I thought of him was closer to pity. He had everything: a loving wife, a promising career, a chance at a family, and he threw it all away for the thrill of deception. Now he was starting over in middle age, his reputation damaged, his choices haunting him. But that was his journey. Mine was moving in a different direction. The lessons I learned from my marriage and its dissolution became a kind of compass. I learned that sacrifice must be reciprocal to be healthy. I learned that trusting someone does not mean ignoring evidence of betrayal. I learned that my value is not determined by whether another person chooses to see it. Most importantly, I learned that losing what I thought was everything was actually the beginning of finding myself. I do not know what the future holds. I might fall in love again, or I might discover that solitude suits me better than I expected. I might expand my business into new cities, or I might sell everything and travel the world. The possibilities feel endless in a way they never did before. What I know for certain is that I am no longer the woman who waited at home for a man who did not deserve her. I am no longer the woman who measured her worth by how much she could give to others. I am no longer the woman who was afraid to demand more from life. The day my husband married his mistress, I thought I had lost everything. But looking back, that was the day I truly found myself. And the game I am playing now, it is called living on my own terms. And I am winning. If you are watching this and going through something similar, I want you to know that you are stronger than you realize. The pain you feel today will become the power you wield tomorrow. Do not let anyone convince you that your worth depends on their approval. You have everything you need within yourself to build a beautiful life. I would love to hear your story. Have you ever experienced betrayal and come out stronger on the other side? What lessons did your hardest moments teach you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you have not already subscribed to this channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next story. Thank you for spending this time with me. I am grateful for each and every one of you. May you find the courage to choose yourself, the wisdom to recognize your worth, and the strength to build the life you deserve. Until next time, take care of yourselves.